Good evening, everyone. I am really happy to, with my Senate majority members representing Westchester and Rockland and Putnam, to be able to host our second uh, town hall, but actually it's our virtual forum, our budget forum. The first one happened last week. It was in the afternoon. We listened to testimony for about 3 hours, and it will be used to inform our decisions as it relates to the governor's budget. It's the same thing here. It will be approximately 3 hours. We have a great deal of speakers, and there will be some ground rules. Everyone will get 2 minutes, and because we're virtual, and we are sorry that it's virtual, because we very much like to be in person, but we understand why it has to be virtual. But during this virtual uh, you know forum, you will do the talking, we will do the listening. So it's not going to be back and forth. You will have 2 minutes to express your opinion about the budget. Laura, who you see from my office, Laura Manara, is the timekeeper. While you are speaking, she will hold up the time to give you a 30-second warning. And then at the end of your time, I will assume that you will have wrapped up. But if there is any more to be said, unfortunately, because the invisible hand of another staff member from Senator Mayer's office, Emiliana, she will be able to cut you off, and then the next person will appear on the virtual forum. It really is the only way we can make sure that we do hear everybody's comments, and everybody's comments are extremely important to us. Today, we have for you to listen to you, Senators Shelley Mayer, and you'll hear from each of them, Senator Pete Harckham, Senator Jamaal Bailey, and the newest senator for us, Senator Elijah Reichlin-Melnick. Senator Biaggi may be with us. We are all back and forth, and things happen in between our forums. So we will, for the most part, be here, but if we have to jump off, not a problem, because our staffs are here collecting all of the information and making sure that we have all of your input. The other thing that I wanted to say is that even if everything you have to say can't be said in 2 minutes, and again, I know that possibly it can't be, we will be accepting testimony. You can email our offices, and Laura, if you would put in the chat where they can send their testimony or mail it to our offices. So there's other ways for us to have the information, just in the event that you cannot get everything in the 2 minutes. And again, just because we're done today doesn't mean we're done listening to you. The budget process is a long process, and it takes between, sorry, between now and rather when the governor presented this budget in January till our statutory deadline, which is April 1st. So there is plenty of time to really make sure that your input is heard. Again, the sooner we have it, that's why we have these forums, the better. But again, this is not your only chance, but it is our chance to at least, welcome you into the process. And we are looking forward to it. So I will, keep quiet for a moment and introduce each of the members to say a few words. And I'll start with Senator Shelley Mayer.
Well, thank you, Madam Leader, and thank you to my colleagues and the staff, Emiliana Ulay and Laura. Thank you so much for helping, and all the rest of our staffs. Thank you for all of you who have come forward. It may seem like a short time, 2 minutes, but as the leader said, you will be able to submit written testimony. And for us, the important thing is we're here to hear you, not to speak at you or to speak to you, but to hear you, to make sure that your view is among the many that we have to consider in crafting a very difficult budget this year, responding to COVID, the state's financial difficulties. Luckily, we have some help from Washington, but we have a very challenging time ahead of us. And we know that. And the last thing I want to add is, in addition to being so pleased to be able to hear you, is that you have a very cohesive and strong delegation here. We work together. We are in concert. We're very fortunate to have the leader be from Westchester, but we are committed to the full breadth of Westchester, whether from Southwest Yonkers to Peekskill to Portchester, Bedford and in between. All of our communities, count, and they all matter to us. So thank you for making sure your voice is heard, and I look forward to hearing from all of you, and we will keep track of what you say and your testimony. So with that, I will go back to you, Madam Leader.
Thank you, Senator Mayer. Next, you'll hear from Senator Pete Harckham. Senator Harckham.
Thank you very much, Madam Leader. Great to be here with you and with all our Westchester colleagues. Special thanks to the staff. Senator Mayer said it all, so I'll be very brief. The one thing I will say is that this is your budget. It's not the governor's budget. It's not our budget. It's your budget. And I thank you all for coming today to claim ownership of your budget and tell us what your priorities are for your budget. So I look forward to listening and following up. And as was said, if you don't get your full testimony in, don't worry, just top line it and send us your written testimony, because that has a lot of value as well. And we do go through that. So thanks for being here and look forward to hearing what you have to say. Thank you, Madam Leader.
Thank you so much, Senator Harckham. Senator Bailey, you're on.
Thank you, Madam Leader. And look, Senators Mayer and Harckham said it the best. We really value your input. We want to hear what you have to say. In crafting this voluminous piece of legislation, every detail matters and your voices matter. So not 1 second of the 2 minutes that you're going to spend with us today speaking, or the paper that you send to us, is something that you should write off. You should realize that we are taking this very seriously. We have the best staff in state government who's paying attention to it, and we are paying attention to the needs and desires of our constituents. So from my little corner of Westchester and Money Earner Mount Vernon, as they call it, I want to thank you all for coming, but realize that what you're doing is helping to craft a budget, not just for Westchester County, but for every county, all 62 counties in the state of New York. So with that, I say thank you for participating in our democracy and continue to participate. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Leader.
Thank you so much, Senator Bailey. And then again, our newest addition to this wonderful team is Senator Elijah Reichlin-Melnick.
Thank you so much, Madam Leader. It's great to be here with you and my colleagues in the state Senate. Everybody in Westchester, you are all very lucky. You have an all-star team of people here, from the leader on down, and folks who are chairing important committees, who are producing great groundbreaking legislation. And it is really a privilege and an honor to be able to join this group of legislators representing Ossining and Briarcliff in the Senate. And I'm just happy to be here tonight to listen, to hear from so many of you about the important issues you're dealing with in your individual capacity, in your capacity working with organizations. This is a tough budget year, no question, probably the hardest. Great time for me to come in to the Senate. It's probably the hardest budget year any of us have ever seen, even the folks who have been doing this for a while. But we're going to persevere. We're going to try to do as best as we can to get the funding for organizations and folks who need it. So happy to be here this evening to listen to all of you.
Thank you so much, Senator. And, I say the same thing from the time I got in, and I think Shelley and we all say the same thing. It's all been tough, but I think, that's part of what makes this so rewarding, because we know that it's tough on all of us, but it's really tough on our constituents as well. And that's, again, why it's such an important opportunity to be able to hear directly from our constituents how these budgets and how these tough times, impact their lives and the organizations, that they are running. I also want to say for the audience that the Assembly often has and probably has had its own similar forums. It used to be we did them together, but that was when we in the Senate did not have such a robust majority. So we are still working with the Assembly. We have to work with the Assembly in order to get to the right answer. It's a three-way negotiation. So if you've testified to the assembly, don't think that it's duplicative or not necessary or superfluous. It all matters, and we all work together to try and come to the end that will, again, make New York State and its residents stronger. So that being said, we will begin. And again, remember, you got 2 minutes, and when your time is up, if your camera's on, we're going to see you. So be prepared. And then again, after 2 minutes, you will be removed, and then the next person will be up. We will call the names, and again, looking so much forward to hearing your testimony. So I will begin with from my alma mater, the president, Marvin Krislov, Pace University.
All right. Oh my goodness. Okay, I'll start quickly. Thank you for hearing comments on the governor's budget proposal. I'm Marvin Krislov, the president of Pace University. This is my first time testifying in New York State for the Senate. I want to say that we're very grateful for all you do. Pace is a private, not-for-profit university with campuses in Westchester and New York City. Our primary mission is to create opportunities for our students. 30% of our undergrads are low-income students eligible for Pell Grants. 40% are first in their families to attend college. More than 40% come from underrepresented minority groups. We are ranked the #1 private four-year college in the entire country for driving upward economic mobility. We're grateful that the executive budget proposal preserves funding for the tuition assistance program, but we believe that the best way for the legislature to help the state's neediest students is by expanding TAP. In recent years, TAP has helped fewer students because it has not kept pace with inflation or with students' increased need. Its funding has not been significantly adjusted in nearly 2 decades. Expanding TAP will help students and families that need assistance the most, families in the lowest income brackets, while protecting student choice. I must ask that you urge your fellow legislators to increase the TAP minimum award from $500 to $1,000, to increase the maximum award from $5,165 to $6,000, and to increase the eligibility cutoff from $80,000 to $110,000 in annual income. Today, New York spends $119 million less on TAP than it did 5 years ago, and the program aids 49,000 fewer students. Unless action is taken, this alarming decline is projected to continue. I hope that the legislature will stop that downward trend. We know it's a tough year, but this is important. This is our future. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much, President Krislov. Good to see you. Next is Stephanie Marquesano, the Harris Project, Inc.
Can I mention also, please make sure that your name on your Zoom box matches the name you gave when you said you signed up to testify. Thank you.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, everybody. I am Stephanie Marquesano, founder of the Harris Project. We are committed to the prevention and treatment of co-occurring disorders. Thank you to the Westchester Delegation for this opportunity. The Mid-Hudson region has received no state funding to undertake the single largest co-occurring system of care transformation happening in the nation. This fall, we successfully launched the Westchester 6-agency, 22-clinician pilot of Encompass, a best practices treatment protocol for 12 to 29-year-olds with co-occurring disorders, a true labor of love as reimbursement rates do not cover the costs necessary to support the effort. Recognizing the critical need for concerned loved ones to learn positive and motivational skills to support their young people, this spring the Harris Project will be funding up to 18 clinicians from these 6 agencies to be certified in community reinforcement and family training, which when implemented with fidelity will provide true wraparound services for teens and young adults with COD. We also envision creating an engagement platform to ensure access to pro-social, non-substance using activities, which are key to participant success. While we continue to plug along, it is time for the state to take a more formal role in this work. I'm pleased that the executive budget has a goal of better serving people with COD through the creation of the Office of Addiction and Mental Health Services. But I'm concerned as key topics remained housed in one agency or the other. For example, prevention dollars are squarely in OASIS without much opportunity for innovative programming like our co-occurring disorders awareness work. Block grants and opioid settlement funds should also be designated for integrated prevention, early intervention, treatment, and recovery efforts. In addition, I haven't heard about any anticipated funds generated under proposed marijuana legalization legislation going towards this, and we know these needs will only increase if that legislation is passed. In short, I'd like you to consider creating a single integrated Senate Standing Committee to mirror the Office of Addiction and Mental Health Services, creating a COD Blue Ribbon panel, a review of all funding streams, RFPs, and initiatives to build capacity and integrate funding across OMH and OASIS, as well as an ombudsman. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephanie. Next, we'll hear from Jerry Mariano, who's a constituent, about home care legislation.
Hi,
Hi, Jerry.
I was born in October 67 at White Plains Hospital, where I was left by my biological parents. In December 67, I was transferred to Blythedale Children's Hospital as a ward of the state. Westchester County DSS workers didn't want me to grow up in an institution, which was quite progressive thinking then, and thus found me a family. Fast forward to 2021, I live alone in Armonk. Due to Medicaid restrictions, I could not be seen out of state and instead had life-changing surgery at HSS in February 2015 that left me unable to sit up under my own power, let alone walk. Once upon a time, I lived independently, drove, cooked for myself, did my own laundry, bathed, etc. What irony that Medicaid restrictions led me to need full-time home care. Due to varying circumstances, I've been in the nearly impossible position of hiring new aides through CDPAP since September. My outreach on various platforms have been nearly futile, as all good candidates have stated the wage rate is too low. I'm still trying to fill shifts 7 days a week. There is now a statewide campaign called Fair Pay for Home Care. With the tragedy of the COVID pandemic, we have seen the terrible loss of life in New York State, and especially those in nursing homes. Because New York State continues to ignore the need for increased fair wages for home care, I could be forced into a facility now that is far more dangerous for my well-being. But perhaps New York State doesn't value the lives of us with disabilities. Are we that disposable? Others last week cited statistics, and the Cooney report has been referenced with the relevant projections. But behind the statistics are living people, those who are PAs who need to provide for their families, and those of us who need PAs to be able to live safely at home. Exactly what Westchester social workers wanted from me over 50 years ago. I am one of those statistics that I and others are dealing with. I am one of those statistics I wanted your delegation to see and hear from today as you finalize the budget. Please remember me and work with Senator May and Assemblyman Gottfried to budget fair pay for home care. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mariano. Next is John Cooney Jr., the Construction Industry Council.
Thank you, Westchester Senate Delegation. I thank you for your time today. My name is John Cooney Jr. I am the Executive Director of the Construction Industry Council of Westchester and the Hudson Valley. I'm here today just to speak to you briefly regarding the governor's proposal for the New York State DOT capital plan, which is a $5.8 billion spend and is the second year of a $11.9 billion plan. In the course of the last 5 to 7 years, road and bridge conditions have not improved. In fact, they've deteriorated. Pavement replacement cycles in New York State have gone from 8.6 years in 2012 to 21.2 years in 2017. The last regional conditions report for roads and bridges released by New York State DOT was in 2016. The core program spend for 2021-2022 is $2.25 billion, which is the lowest level it has been at in the last 5 years. Of the $5.8 billion spent this year, 22% or $1.3 billion is earmarked for priority projects like the Van Wyck, Bruckner, and I-81. We in our region have benefited from these types of priority projects, and we hope to again, like the Route 684 corridor and Route 9A in Briarcliff come to mind. The state's local highway system comprises is 87% of the state's roads. Last year, that system felt a $120.6 million reduction in CHIPS, PAVE New York, and extreme winter repair. Our suggestions are as follows. First off, the core projects are great. We get involved and we build them, but the local road conditions have suffered. Our suggestion is as follows. New York State received $426 million targeted to New York State DOT. That money could be used on local roads as a supplement to increase and improve the road conditions that we have here in New York. Further and last,
I'm sorry,
Okay.
your time is up, but I
Thank
do
you.
appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next, we will be hearing from Sally Pinto from the Yonkers Council of PTAs. Unmute, Sally.
Thank you, Senator. My name is Sally Pinto, and I'm the co-chair for the Advocacy Committee for the Yonkers Council of PTAs. Thank you to the Westchester, Rockland, and Putnam delegation for holding this event, for listening and helping us participate in our democracy. What can I say in the span of 2 minutes that you have not heard already, especially in a tough budget year? You know the numbers: 90% graduation rate in Yonkers, 27,000 students, 77% of who are African American and Hispanic. One social worker to over 1,750 students, one school counselor to over 750 students, one school psychologist to over 768 students. COVID has negatively impacted our society, each and every one of us on this phone call, especially our children and especially those of color. Those numbers don't work for our children and our families. How about a story? A single mom raising a 10-year-old, a fourth grader, who now has trouble socializing when he did not have that problem before, who now has trouble participating in his class when he did not have that trouble before. He's not the only one. When is he going to be able to see that school psychologist? Is he going on a line with 767 other children? Our students, our families, our teachers, principals, and staff are doing the best they can. But COVID is too much, and we all know that. So let's talk educational equity. In order to have educational equity, we must have equitable, sustainable, and recurring funding. That includes an equitable amount of federal stimulus funding. Mayor Spano stated that the feds made available $4 billion in state aid to New York schools, yet Yonkers education aid is being reduced by $1 million. Yonkers expects a $50 million budget gap and is the only Big Five district to have a gap. Again, those numbers do not work. As elected officials, I ask that you provide an equitable funding from the stimulus funds and work to reduce the ratios of our social workers, psychologists, and mental health workers. This is for our Yonkers children, for all of our futures. Our children deserve better. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Next, we'll hear from Harold King from the Council of Industry of Southeastern New York.
Good evening, Leader Stewart-Cousins and members of the Westchester Delegation. My name is Harold King, and I am the President of the Council of Industry. I also serve as Vice President of the Manufacturing Alliance of New York. The Alliance is made up of 7 associations like ours across the state that are working together to strengthen the manufacturing sector. For the past 4 years, the Alliance has had the Senate support to develop and grow the Manufacturers Intermediary Apprentice Program, MIAP, and today I ask that you continue that support at the same level of $750,000 in the next budget. I realize I'm preaching to the choir here. I've spoken with many of you, and I know that you know how important manufacturing is. It's an engine of economic growth and prosperity in our communities. It provides jobs that average more than $70,000 a year in our region, provides health insurance and retirement benefits. It provides multiple career pathways and educational opportunities. And increasingly, we have come to understand that a vibrant manufacturing sector is essential to our national security. For manufacturers, workforce is the main challenge to growth. This was the case before the pandemic, it's the case during the pandemic, and will be post-pandemic. Just today, a survey was released from the Manufacturing Institute and the accounting firm BKD, finding that 77% of manufacturing firms with under 500 employees are struggling to hire the skilled workers and expect that to continue for years to come. While we need to fill all types of positions, from entry-level operators to PhD researchers, we know the biggest needs remain skilled trades such as machinists, toolmakers, electromechanical technicians, and the like. The MyApp Apprentice Program is addressing this need. Our apprentice program supports equitable access to registered apprentices for all individuals. It's the I in the MyApp that makes the program unique and effective. Intermediary. Organizations like the Council of Industry and our alliance partners serve as intermediaries between the small and mid-sized businesses and the Department of Labor, making their excellent and rigorous apprentice program available and accessible to firms that would not have the wherewithal to navigate their bureaucracy. Since its original pilot in 2016, the program has grown to more than 200 companies, and we would appreciate your support at $750,000 for the next budget year.
Thank you so much, Mr. King. Appreciate it. Our next speaker is Lisa Tain from the Greenberg 11 School Board.
Good evening, Senators. First, with my school board hat on, representing Special Act school districts, thank you, Senator Mayer, for your Bill 572 allowing reserve funds for special acts. I have a new example in support of this. Schools secure funding for capital projects through bonds. 90% of New York public school districts have a bond rating of A1 or better, but special acts fall to non-investment grade or junk bond status because of our very low credit profile. As a result, there's far more limited pool of investors and we have to pay dramatically higher interest rates. An example, Greenberg 11, my district, recently got an $8 million bond at 6% interest, where an equivalent community school would be 1.5% interest. This equals a $4.5 million difference at the end. So it costs us that much additional. It's just unconscionable. And this is taxpayer money enriching private investment firms, not going towards educating our students. So reserve funds would be one minor step in correcting the problem of our low credit profiles. Now, with my private citizen hat on, we know it's time for marijuana to be legal in New York, and not just because it's a potential revenue raiser or will be legal in our surrounding communities or safer product, but because of justice and equality. In this time of reckoning of systematic injustice to Black and brown people, it's time to acknowledge that the war on drugs is a war on people of color. And if you care about social justice, and we know you do, racial justice equals marijuana justice, and marijuana justice equals the MRTA, not the governor's disgraceful CRTA. The MRTA has benefited from years of revision after much scrutiny, in contrast to the governor's, which has had zero input from constituents or any improvement, and it fails to address all of the important issues. It makes criminal penalties worse. It provides no home grow. It doesn't adequately address collateral consequences, and no guaranteed reinvestment for communities most harmed. So please use your legislative power to help the most vulnerable students and those harmed by the war on people of color by supporting special act schools and bringing the MRTA to the floor and passing it as a standalone bill.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Marty Sommer from New York State United Teachers. Unmute, Marty.
Senators, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. You've heard from two of my NYS colleagues last week, and I will be followed by one other later this evening. NYS's written testimony has been submitted to the delegation, in which we address issues that we've been discussing for the past several years and have only been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. I will focus my comments on career and technical education, those programs primarily in our BOCES across the state and the Big Five school districts, which prepare students with entry-level job skills or to continue their education in our community colleges. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that the COVID-19 pandemic has altered the employment landscape for the foreseeable future. We will need to rely on our BOCES across the state to work with its respective local business communities to develop CT programs that will result in employment opportunities for our students. In recent years, these partnerships have resulted in more than 60 new CT programs. Additionally, the Bureau of Labor Statistics projects a less than what had been expected growth rate in industries such as food service, non-residential construction, and transit and ground passenger transportation. These are related CT offerings across our state. Think of our culinary, automotive tech, carpentry, electrical, and HVAC students. What does the future hold for them in the aftermath of a recovering economy? The state's chronic underfunding of CT programs has hurt the BOCES' ability to create and expand CT offerings. Furthermore, school districts are constrained by the property tax cap and low aidable amounts in supporting BOCES programs. Additionally, the governor's proposal to collapse BOCES aid into a block grant will further erode the purchase of BOCES services, let alone the BOCES' ability to offer relevant 21st century training for students desiring to enter the workforce. Nothing less than fully funding CTE is called for now as we face the challenges of a re-emerging economy.
Thank you so much, Marty. So our next speaker will be Caitlin Carpenter from New York Youth Climate Leaders. Hi.
Thanks so much for holding this hearing and giving me the time to speak with you today. My name is Caitlin Carpenter. I'm 16 years old and a junior at Mamaroneck High School. I'm also the Westchester Regional Field Organizer for the New York Youth Climate Leaders. Our organization, made up of young people from across the state, recently met with over 100 state assembly members and senators, including some of you, to discuss eliminating non-essential fossil fuel subsidies and passing the Invest in Our New York package. And I would like to touch on both of those today. Looking through the budget, New York State gives approximately $1.6 billion worth of tax exemptions to the fossil fuel industry each year. While some of these exemptions serve to aid low-income households, such as those that reduce the cost of heating oil, almost a third of them can be deemed non-essential. New York has the opportunity to save $550.9 million annually by eliminating these non-essential fossil fuel tax expenditures. Just to give an example, our state loses $118 million annually from exempting airline fuel from a sales tax. Not only does this expenditure contradict the goals outlined in the CLCPA, but it also raises the question, why would we continue to subsidize airline fuel while potentially cutting funding from education, housing, and other essential programs? The written testimony I submitted specifies each tax expenditure and how much cutting it would raise. I would encourage you to review this carefully. Your children are watching. As for Invest in Our New York, you've already heard from Theo Oshiro, Kamran Saliani, Noah Gita, and Peter Bernstein at last week's hearing on these bills, and I would like to lift up all of their testimonies. I would also like to take this opportunity to connect wealth taxes to the broader issue of climate justice. As we look to reduce emissions and preserve our environment, we must also look to the lives of those in that environment and recognize that the climate crisis does not affect us all equally. It is those who are most vulnerable to extreme budget cuts this year due to COVID, who are also the most vulnerable to respiratory illnesses due to pollution from nearby power plants or displacement from their homes due to extreme flooding. I and the New York Climate Leaders support the Invest in Our New York package, not only because it has the potential to raise over $51 billion annually to support essential programs, but also because it works to bring a livable future for all New Yorkers, which is something that the climate movement aims to do as well. Thank you so much for your time and have a nice evening.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. Next, we'll hear from Karen Bellinger, Westchester Putnam School Boards Association.
Hello, greetings to the members of the Westchester Senate Delegation. I'm Karen Belanger, Executive Director of the Westchester Putnam School Boards Association. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today regarding issues facing public education in our region. The School Boards Association joins with many in public education who are fearful of a financial cliff if all federal pandemic relief funds are used to supplant state aid instead of the intended use for districts to manage the extraordinary costs of the pandemic and recovery. Even with the use of federal funding, many of our districts will be receiving less aid than last year. We also object to the addition of STAR funding to school aid runs, as those dollars are intended as assistance to property taxpayers and do not provide additional funds for school districts who are entitled to receive the full amount of their voter-approved tax levies. We ask you to reject the proposed consolidation of expense-based aids and the reduction in those needed aid categories. In addition to the proposed aid cuts, funding the prior aid claims queue and the state share of residential placements for special needs students is critical to local school district funding. While WestPUT applauds the executive budget recommendation to permit transportation aid for certain uses, we believe aid should be provided for standby costs as districts were faced with significant uncertainty last spring and this school year on whether in-person instruction would happen from week to week. Freezing levels of foundation aid for 2 years has put many more districts behind on fully funding the formula. 19 of the 46 school districts in Westchester and Putnam are projected to be at less than 60% of full funding of foundation aid next year. We also ask for a revised formula that includes updating the regional cost index to ensure it reflects the cost structure of districts in all New York City commuter counties. Permitting a true 2% allowable growth factor in the tax levy cap calculation for the coming year would permit boards to ask their voters for support in a year of extraordinary COVID costs. Increasing management flexibility of school districts would improve the long-term efficiency of school district costs. Special Act school districts are public schools that provide specialized services to some of New York State's most challenged students, and they need legislative and regulatory relief to improve their stability. Please ensure that funding and assistance to public school districts will be available as we recover from the pandemic and tend to the academic and mental health needs of our students. Thank you for your support.
Thank you so much, Karen.
All righty, thank you. Our next speaker will be Roger Batakaria. Forgive me if I butchered your last name, Roger. Roger Batakaria, but please correct me. I apologize. Here comes Roger.
Hello, everyone. I'm Roger Bhattacharya. I live in Briarcliff Manor in the Ossining School District. You almost got my name right. My wife and I have lived here since 2007, and we have 2 young children attending the Ossining School District. I'm honored to be here today before you testifying. As you are aware, Ossining is one of the 5 school districts that have been adversely impacted in the calculation of foundation aid. As a school district, we get less than half of what would be our fair share of aid. That means that there are fewer dollars to spend on our children's educational needs compared to other neighboring school districts. Further, this has led to a widening of education equity gaps and needs between those that have versus those that have not. The pandemic has clearly exacerbated this situation. In recent months, I've spoken with families who are struggling to keep up their children's learning not through any fault of their own. One of the families I spoke with recently shared with me how their 4 kids are struggling to connect virtually into their classes. It has created conditions where the children have fallen behind on classes and class assignments. Some of those children have fallen so far behind that they have practically given up. This is just one of many stories I've heard like this, and it affects students in our district of all ages. It has been said by Horace Mann, the pioneer of US public education, education then, beyond all other divides of human origin, is a great equalizer of the conditions of men, the wheel of balance and of social machinery. We want our education in Ossining to be the great equalizer. We want all of our children to have those tools and resources to have equitable opportunities to learn, grow, and develop socially, emotionally, and intellectually. I ask that you consider your budget and you look to fix those equity issues in our funding. I ask that you give our school district its fair share of funding that it so desperately needs. And I thank you all for taking the time to listen to me and having me here.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you very much. And our next speaker is Thomas Dargan. Thomas?
He's not here, I believe, Senator Harckham.
All right. We can always come back to Thomas. Elaine Ware? Elaine Ware. Are you here, Elaine?
Elaine is there.
There we go.
You have to unmute, Elaine.
Unmute. Did I
There
get
we
it?
go.
Oh, I don't have a picture.
Your video is on the lower left of your screen.
Start my video. Let's see.
There you go.
You can't, I'll just adjust this now.
There you go. Perfect.
Okay, thank you so much for being so patient with me. Okay, my name is Elaine Weir, and I'm particularly concerned about the environment, especially air pollution in New York. My daughter literally moved up to the Adirondacks so she could breathe. She suffered from asthma down here and got to the point where she just moved. So I do feel bad for everybody who has children with asthma. But I want to thank all of you for supporting the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. It's made a huge difference already. Now we need to fund it. So I'd like you to support the Climate and Community Investment Act so that we can fund the 100% renewables and create good paying jobs to support our new clean economy. And we do very much need to invest in communities that have been most affected by pollution and climate change. And I understand that there'll be a pollution tax. And I think we should also take all those subsidies that Caitlin Carpenter mentioned, and we should apply them to the funds for the renewables. So I understand that there'll still be people that might not be able to pay their bills. So I think we should switch them to clean energy first. And then after they switch, then provide a subsidy if needed. We do not want to use the pollution tax funds to continue polluting our air and subsidizing the fossil fuel industry. And that would result in poor people being left behind in our 100% renewable transmission. So we want to make sure that they get their neighborhoods cleaned up too. Okay, thank you so much.
Right on time. Thank you very much, Elaine. And our next speaker is Madonna Town from the American Lung Association.
Hello. Hello, my name is Madonna Towns. I am from Power Against Tobacco. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator. Power covers Putnam, Orange, and Rockland County. We help, sorry, my computer froze. I'm sorry, there we go. We focus on helping local businesses, organizations, implement tobacco-free grounds policies for safer communities. Today, I'm here to discuss the importance of combating tobacco use and the secondhand smoke. Although the numbers of tobacco users have decreased in the past 21 years with tobacco control, tobacco continues to be the leading cause of death in the United States. Cigarette smoking is responsible for over 480,000 deaths per year. This is about 5 deaths annually. Amid our global pandemic, it's important now than ever to prevent and to reduce tobacco use. Recent evidence has shown that smokers are more susceptible to severe symptoms if they contract COVID-19. The CDC has shared that former and current tobacco users are at higher risk of severe illness of COVID-19. Reducing tobacco use and exposure to secondhand smoke not only saves lives, but it also saves money for the New Yorkers. Currently, New York State spends about $9.7 billion in healthcare, which is $2.7 billion paid by Medicaid. In New York State, residents are taxed $1,300 per household. Between 2014 and 2020, New York State has implemented 20 local tobacco retail environment policies that have helped smoking rates. We're grateful for the flavor ban that was done in 2019 with the city of Yonkers, the first in the state. We would like to continue to work with Yonkers and implement a menthol ban. Currently, our reality check coordinator, Carissa, has been working with the youth and has worked with.
I'm afraid your time's up. I'm sorry. But
Thank you, Senator Harckham.
Thank you so much. And our next speaker is Giovanni Wellington from the Boys and Girls Club of New Rochelle.
Hello. Can everybody hear me?
And I understand Youth of the Year. Am I correct there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. For the Boys and Girls Club.
Congratulations to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi.
You get an extra 15 seconds for that.
Okay, thank you. Hi. Thank you for this opportunity to share tonight. My name is Giovanni Wellington, and I'm a native of New Rochelle, and I am a junior at New Rochelle High School. I'm here tonight representing the Boys and Girls Club of New Rochelle, and I'm the president of the Keystone Club and the 2021 Youth for Year advocate for the DC and New Rochelle Youth of the Year. I'm here to advocate for continued funding of after-school programming. The reason why I advocate for this is because I see many of my peers in my community who have benefited and others who could benefit from resources provided by after-school programs. One way club has benefited a close friend of mine is by providing them a safe environment and a college help needed in order for them to complete high school and not be a sophomore in college. For me personally, the club has changed me from not being so active and being the face of the club and highly engaged in sports. I want to thank you for this opportunity and also to let you know that this continued reduction of after-school funding like Advantage could leave many of my peers who already benefit from programs with transformative resources, not out of choice of lack showing up, but because the programs and staffing will no longer be present to deliver the educational, college, career, and fun experiences that I've been blessed with. I'd love for my Senate representatives to restore Advantage after-school funding and support other after-school funding that supports youth environment, employment, or college, career, and safety resources. Thank you for the opportunity to share my concerns. Have a blessed evening. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you very much,
Thank
Giovanni.
you.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it.
All right, our next speaker is Angeline McLean from 1199 SEIU. Angeline?
Okay, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Yes, my name is Angeline McLean, and I'm a CNA at Springbrook Manor Nursing Home and a member of 1199 SEIU. I'm here to urge you to invest in quality care for all of New York nursing homes. Sorry about that. For all of New York nursing homes, because the situation have been terrible for a long time. And now with the COVID pandemic, the situation have gotten worse. I need to spend more time with my residents. For example, I'm in a room with a resident while another resident needs help and calling for help. I can't leave to go. So this resident tries to get up and try to help himself or herself and fall down. Now it's another problem, and we have more problem on top of that. So we would just like something to do about this so we can give quality care to our residents so they are in a better situation and to get better care in their life. So thank you for your time and thank everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Nice.
All right. Our next speaker is Nicholas Vallone from VP Buses.
I don't believe that Nicholas is here, so we'll have to go to the next person.
All right, no Nicholas, we'll circle him, maybe he'll come later. Liz Weingast from JFREJ. Liz?
Hello, and I would like
Hi there,
to.
do you have video, Liz?
Hello, how are you all? Okay. Good evening, Madam Leader and the entire delegation. I am Elizabeth Weingast, a lifelong resident of Westchester County and a 30-year resident of New Rochelle. I'm a member of JFREJ, Jews for Racial and Economic Justice, and here on behalf of the New York Caring Majority. Professionally, I'm a nurse executive in long-term and community-based care. I'm a believer that policy and budget matters are a reflection of our values as a society. Those of us who work in the field of geriatrics know that long-term care, care at home, as well as in nursing homes, is not traditionally valued in our society. Our budgets have reflected the lack of regard that is held for frail older adults who require care and the caregivers dedicated to delivering that care. Over 500,000 families use home care in New York State, and that number will only grow as our state continues to age. Caregivers are terribly underpaid. The job pays less than $13 an hour in most of the state. The low wage does not attract potential caregivers to the field. 17% of home care positions are unfilled, as you heard from a homebound client earlier. And as a result, 45% of the state's direct care workers live in or near poverty. Many work more than one job to make ends meet. In the wake of COVID, we must be evaluating how to rebuild our long-term care in a way that prioritizes community-based services and the workforce. Our policy request is that home care workers be paid a minimum of 150% of the current regional minimum wage. This will allow for greater recruitment of a home care workforce and encourage workers to remain in rewarding jobs. The dedicated, hardworking caregivers and those who care for them have been marginalized for too long. Their welfare depends on adequate funding for salaries of the caregivers. I know your value sets are aligned with mine and that of the New York Caring Majority. I implore you to support Senator May and Assemblymember Godfrey's fair pay for home care legislation in this year's budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Have a good night.
Thank you. And now, Michael Howard. Is Michael here? There we go. Hello, sir.
Hey, good evening. My name is Michael J. Howard. I live in Queens at Senate District 15. And so far, this is my second time in this event because I remember last year I was there in person. Well, the reason I'm here tonight to let you know that I'm tired of myself and people like me being having these austerity policies from these rich oligarchies that we have in this planet. You know, like for example, I'm blaming Bill Gates. He's one of the rich oligarchies who weaponized this pandemic so people like me, myself and people like me get distracted. Well, anyway, my mind is on I'm worried about transportation because I would love to see more subway stations to be accessible. Like if any subway station can't have elevators, they can have ramps for people like and plus okay. I also have a mild intellectual disability. That's why I care about these things. You know what I mean? So one last thing I want to say, tax the rich in order for me to see these things come in handy. You know what I mean? I want to thank y'all, and y'all have a good evening.
Mike, thank you very much for your testimony. Thank you very much.
Anytime.
All right. Our next speaker is Jimena Francella. There's Jimena.
Good afternoon, Majority Leaders, Stewart-Cousins, and distinguished senators. I'm Jimena Francella, a small business owner and a board member of the Larchmont Chamber of Commerce. Women have been unprecedented impacted by COVID-19. With the shutdown of school, it has been becoming impossible for many women to maintain their business and also care for the children at home and supervise virtual learning. Women are more likely than men to own businesses in industries that have been hard hit by the pandemic, such as restaurants and retail shops. Women and people of color are less likely to have the same access to capital as white men. A House committee report found the Paycheck Protection Program left behind many minority and women-owned businesses because banks prioritize lending to customers. Women-owned businesses have been a driving force in the economy's growth. About 42% of businesses were owned by women in 2019, compared with about 4% in 1972, according to American Express State of Women's Owned Business report in 2019. In the past 5 years, total employment by women-owned businesses rose 8% versus an increase of 1.8% for all businesses, the report found. Without stimulus or some sort of relief, there's a strong expectation in the next couple of months that things will turn for the worse. The executive budget proposes $635 million in general fund. The executive budget proposes $635,000 in general fund spending for minority and women-owned business development and lending program. 42% of businesses are owned by women. The amount proposed is a small token of relief to women who are the driving the economy and providing jobs and building their communities. The economic budget of $572 million, $635,000 allocated to minority and women business owners is not sufficient. So please keep in mind that this is very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Always good to see you. Thank you.
Likewise.
All right, Ellen Morehouse is next from Student Assistance Services Corporation. Ellen Morehouse.
Good evening. In Westchester County, 20 addiction prevention and treatment programs have closed in the last 15 years because of a lack of state funding and the inability to be fiscally viable. Every one of the remaining programs currently has at least one staff vacancy and difficulty recruiting and retaining staff at every level because of the low salaries and difficult work. In 2019, 60% of the supervisors in Westchester addiction treatment programs reported working second jobs to make ends meet. Because of the inadequate funding, 19 Westchester schools no longer participate in my agency's substance abuse prevention program because we have had to increase their cost every year to balance the lack of state aid. Because of inadequate funding, a New Rochelle mom drove her marijuana-addicted adolescent with a psychiatric disorder to a program in Messina, New York, because there was no program closer that could provide appropriate Medicaid-funded treatment for her daughter. Yet the executive budget includes a $13 million reduction in aid for addiction services on top of the 20% reduction in state funding we have been asked to absorb since July. If this happens, some Westchester agencies will have to lay off staff, and there's a good chance that others will have to reduce services and possibly close. I know that all of you are really committed to quality substance abuse prevention, treatment, and recovery services. So please do everything you can to restore the cut to Oasis and make sure that new federal funds don't supplant state funds, don't use additional funds to shore up existing programs, increase existing revenue streams such as taxes on alcohol, tobacco, and nicotine products. And please consider the latest research and don't legalize non-medical marijuana, which will cost much more in healthcare, law enforcement, lost revenue from decreased worker productivity, not impact social justice issues, and cause heartache for so many New Yorkers. Thank you so much, and I'll be sending in expanded testimony.
Thank you very much, Ellen. Thank you. And before we announce our next speaker, I just want to say we've been joined by our Westchester colleague, Senator Alessandra Biaggi. Welcome, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Harckham. I'm very happy to be here with everybody.
Great to see you. And I will end my shift the way I began, probably by butchering a last name. So forgive me. Robert Sikoria. Did I get that right, Robert? I'm sorry.
You got pretty close. Hold on.
No rush.
Oh, yes, there is. You got it pretty close with Sikoria, but.
Oh, Sikoria, I apologize.
Italian, it's Chicoria, so it's no big deal.
Oh,
my name is Rob. Anyway, my name is Rob. 57 years old, born and bred in this house. My parents' house. I'm a C5 quadriplegic, was injured 39 years ago in an automobile accident. I was a passenger, not that that matters. I was just as guilty. I've had this one PA for 31 years, Rosemary Parks, as Senator Mayer knows. We've met a couple of times. And Senator Stewart-Cousins. I think that the plan that Godfried and Senator May implemented is long overdue, especially now in the last year with the pandemic. People, are afraid to ride mass transit workers. People are afraid that they're going to come in their house and give them COVID. So what I did was I got 2 FIs. I'm also part of CD Pennies. Without these aids, I could have never went to college. My parents died young. I could have never went to college. I could have never got jobs. I worked for Concepts of Independence. I worked for Westchester Disabled on the Move. I no longer work because I don't have the stamina. And I can't really say much more than Jerry already did. She did an excellent job. Had I known she was going to be on, I would have did the February, the earlier one, the February 11th. Anyway, institutionalizing us over not fair pay for workers, as you can see what happened with the nursing homes got hit really hard. Now, I work with Brian O'Malley from CD Pennies. My time is up, I'm sorry. I'd like to thank you all for listening. And if there's anything you need from me, let me know.
Robert, good to see you. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I'll pick up from here. Next is Raina Shapiro from NYSIT, New York State United Teachers.
Hi, I shouldn't know how to do this. I do it all day at school. But good evening, Senators. My name is Raina Shapiro. I'm one of the NYSIT PAC coordinators. I want to thank you for giving me and all my colleagues an opportunity to speak. You've heard, you've read foundation aid, school aid, all the bread and butter issues that are going to make or break public education in New York. But I'm also a school psychologist, so I just want to bring up a few of the issues that I feel are particularly important to me and that I see every day in my job. You know, whatever the form of education that they've been receiving, fully remote, hybrid, in person, education is just not what it should be for all the students in New York. And teaching and educating children is not an easy task either. I guess what I'm really wanting to stress is that we definitely want the children back in school. We all talk about their mental health needs, and that's absolutely true. Just bringing them into a classroom without the necessary support of clinical staff, school psychologists, school social workers, counselors, is not going to make a big enough difference. Some of our smaller districts, and I feel very lucky to be working in Edgemont, where we have a full complement of school psychologists, are really struggling. You heard from Sally Pinto what's going on in Yonkers, and I'm sure there are many other districts where the inequity in terms of providing the support for staff is definitely needed. One of the things that I'm concerned about, again, as a psychologist, is the children are struggling academically. Retaining students, referring them to special education is not going to be the answer. We need additional funding for schools so that teachers can differentiate, provide intervention, and also have the material and training they need so that our teachers can meet the needs of students and help them recover and strive.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Raina.
You're welcome.
Next is Howard Horowitz, Horowitz Research Insight Loft. You are muted, Howard. There you are.
Good evening. Are we together?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you for this opportunity to testify. My name is Howard Horowitz, a longtime resident and business owner in New Rochelle, New York. I'm a constituent of Senator Shelley and Assembly Member Amy Paulin. I'm a member of Temple Israel of New Rochelle and have leadership positions at community-based organizations, including the New York Caring Majority. I am here to strongly support fair pay for home care legislation being sponsored by Senator Rachel May and Assembly Member Richard Godfrey. Until just this month, my family has been caring for our recently deceased 90-year-old mother. We came to know firsthand the struggle families and their caregivers face to obtain sustainable, affordable home care services from well-trained and well-paid home care workers. The home care workforce is key to ensuring New Yorkers can access quality care in their homes. Now is the time we must invest in the workforce to match supply of quality home care to growing demand and to provide sorely needed, high-paying, productive jobs in a sector that benefits our region and the entire state and provides a much-needed and timely stimulus to local economies. It's a risk-free investment in our collective well-being. A poor workforce is not sustainable for both those who give and those who receive care. An unhappy and poor workforce with low wages, with little training, and few benefits cannot be expected to provide the essential work of caring for us, our elders, the sick, or the disabled. Yet, that is exactly what we have. Median annual earnings for home care workers is a shameful $19,200. In addition to low wages, poverty—
I'm sorry, your time is up. So
erratic scheduling, lack of career advancement opportunities, and lack of benefits contribute to the challenge of recruiting and retaining workers.
Okay,
As
I'm
a
sorry,
citizen,
Howard.
taxpayer, and business person in New York State,
You have to end because it wouldn't be fair to our others. I apologize. Okay, Next is Sharon Griest-Ballin, Chair of the Prison Relations Advisory Council, the Town of Bedford. Again, we apologize, but we are keeping the same rules for everyone, so we look forward to reading your testimony.
Terribly sorry, having a little trouble unmuting there. Good evening, everyone. Majority Leader Cousins, esteemed senators, and Laura, thank you very much for what you're doing tonight. I am, as Senator Mayer said, the chair of the Prison Relations Advisory Committee to the Town of Bedford, and I'm here tonight to request, i.e. beg for funds to address both a public safety issue and a social justice issue. For those visitors and employees of our 2 New York State women's prisons in Bedford Hills who take the train in order to visit their family or to go to work, there's a 600-foot area of the road along which they must walk that has no sidewalk. In fact, the road does not even have a shoulder. It is windy, it is narrow, there's a deep ravine along the side of it, and it is heavily trafficked. Kevin Wynn, our Public Works Commissioner in Bedford, conducted a traffic study over a 48-hour period in March of 2020. The total number of cars traveling on that road past the prisons was 11,712 vehicles. David Luther, Vice President of the Southern Region of the Correction Officers Union, said, quote, "The walk from the train station is absolutely deadly and is an accident waiting to happen," end quote. Specifically, I'm asking you to consider 600 feet of concrete sidewalk and curb, which would be 5 feet wide. The sidewalk would start at the corner of Babbitt and Harris Roads, where the current sidewalk ends. The sidewalk would then be built on that remaining 600 feet down Harris Road to the prison entrance. $150,000 is a reasonable budgetary number to build the sidewalk. This is clearly a public safety issue, but it's also a social justice issue. We're well aware that a disproportionate number of people who are in prison and who staff the prisons are people of color, people whose voices have not been heard. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to hopefully help those voices be heard tonight.
Thank you, Sharon. Nice to see you too. Next, Audrey Campbell from 1199 SEIU. Okay.
Unmute, Audrey. Come on, we could do it this time.
Can you unmute? There you go.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes, my name is Audrey Campbell, and I'm a CNA at Yonkers Garden Nursing Home and a member of 1199 SEIU. Thank you for this opportunity. I am here to ask you to please invest in quality care for Yonkers Garden and all of our nursing homes. We, the people who takes care of the resident, have been struggling for years, and now with the COVID pandemic, the situation has gotten even worse. We need to spend more time with our residents. This is my example. I am on a floor with 32 residents. 3/4 of these residents are total care. And if I have a resident, if I'm in a room with a resident while another is ringing for assistance, I will have to leave that resident unmanned and go to see what the other resident needs. And I feel betrayed because of that. That's a form of neglect. I use this pandemic as an example. Workers were out every week because they were positive for COVID. No one appreciated the few workers that were there every day. They said they are giving us incentive, and what they gave us was nothing. And we spend most of our time in this place every day. They don't have enough nurses to do dressing for these residents, and most of these residents break down with bed sore. I think they should have a set pay rate across the board for all nursing home workers, because we are the backbone of this field. With this bill number 54336, I think 40% of the revenue should be spent on patients and 30% should be on staffing, on wages. Because when you check it out, most of the time, at nights and evening, every day, we are short-staffed. Sometimes you have only 2 aides on the floor taking care of like 32 and 35 patients. This is not what nursing is all about. Nursing is about quality.
Audrey, excuse me, your time is up, so just.
Okay,
conclude.
thank you. Thank you for the opportunity of having me and listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Next is Eileen O'Connor from NYCD 16 Indivisible.
Hi, everyone. Hello, Westchester Senate Delegation, and thank you so much for holding this forum. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to speak. My name's Eileen O'Connor. I'm from Yonkers, and I'm one of the leaders of NYCD 16 Indivisible. I wanted to talk about the need to restructure the New York State tax code so that everyone pays their fair share to make New York State a standard bearer of equity. I've lived in New York since 1982, and I've lived in Yonkers with my family since 1995. I'm a nurse practitioner and I've worked almost 40 years with low income and working class families in Yonkers and the Bronx. Our Indivisible group supports the Invest in New York campaign, a series of 6 bills to reform the tax code so that the wealthy pay their fair share. Right now, they are not doing that. The burden of reduced economic growth has fallen on the lower 90% of us. While phone banking last night, I spoke to a Mr. Jenkins who is smothered by hospital debt because his wife is fully bedridden from a stroke and he has to pay out of pocket for someone to help care for her. I have neighbors who are housing insecure, who have had to move because of loss of jobs and income. Some are undocumented and can't apply for help. This pandemic and the lack of good affordable housing has hurt the people of Yonkers in many ways. We need to take care of our families who are here to make it a place where our children can live and work. The present tax code is not allowed for that. Since the 1980s, state government budget cuts to localities have hurt the poor, working class, and disproportionately Black and brown residents. Homeowners have borne the brunt of these tax cuts by having to pay higher property taxes. Tax breaks have allowed the upper 1% to accrue wealth at astounding rates. New York State now has the most unequal income distribution in the nation. It's not right, but we can fix this now. The Invest in Our New York Act bills will create a sustainable, reliable revenue stream of $50 to $70 billion a year to fund the myriad needs of our communities. It will not drive the wealthy away. It will reconnect them to the social fabric that makes New Yorkers what we are. We are all in this together. I implore our assembly persons and senators to support all 6 of these bills. We have a once-in-a-generation chance to make great structural change that'll have an enduring impact on the future of New York State. Thanks very much for allowing me to speak, and I'll submit my fuller testimony. Thanks.
Thank you. And is Jacqueline Baker here? Yes, she is. Hi, Jackie.
Yes, I'm here.
Hello.
Hello. Hello to Majority Leader Stewart-Cousins, the esteemed senators that I know. I'm here to talk on behalf of the sickle cell disease community. As you know, that sickle cell disease is a red blood cell disorder that affects the oxygen from getting to all parts of the body. And as I've been a parent advocate, I've advocated for the sickle cell community in the past. I'm really happy to say that I'm going to be launching the first nonprofit sickle cell first nonprofit to provide a platform for support groups to improve the quality of healthcare for sickle cell disease patients and families in Westchester and Putnam counties. It will be launched sometime early this summer, and I'm asking for funding that would help to support some of the services such as mental health and depression, education awareness, and definitely updated treatments. Because as you know, the pharmacists that come out with new medications, one of them called Aveco is very expensive, and the problem is that sickle cell patients can't afford it. It costs $1,000, and they would need to take the medication for life in order to be pain-free, as they suffer from a severe pain crisis all day, every day. It could be any time. So I'm asking for, if any kind of funding, would you be able to support for that? I'm asking you to keep sickle cell cell in your in forefront and in your vision as you attend to the budget. And I am hoping that you can give any support that you can. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Stay well and be safe. Thank you.
Jacqueline, thank you so much. Next is Kim Marsh from NYSNA, New York State Nursing Association.
There we go.
Hi, Kim.
Hi. Thank you, Leader Stewart-Cousins and senators. I am definitely your constituent, Leader. I live in White Plains all of my life. I have also been an RN at Westchester Medical Center since 1994. Nursing has taken quite the hit, of course, this past year. We desperately need the Safe Staff and Quality Care Act to be passed. It's the only way to ensure hospitals are accountable. You cannot trust them to tell you their actual staffing ratios and what is happening. Our staffing was critical before COVID, and now it's devastated. Patient outcomes are clearly improved by nursing staffing. Every bit of evidence shows it. And every extra patient added to a nurse's ratio takes away from your care. We need no cuts to the safety net hospitals. We need access. Disparities have been laid bare by this pandemic, and the safety net hospitals are in desperate need. I urge you please to take this opportunity this year, after we have been devastated by a pandemic, to pass this act. We have to ensure that we have enough nurses to care for our patients who deserve quality care always. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you very much, Kim. Thank you. Next is Amy Perlow from the Peekskill NAACP.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thanks for hosting and for listening. My name is Amy Perlow. I'm a resident of Peekskill, and I'm here to call for the full funding of our public schools. And I stand in solidarity with those who showed up tonight to testify for other nearby districts. As many know, the vast majority of foundation aid money, which we rely upon to operate our classrooms, is owed to school districts with 40% or more Black and Latinx students, and our district is no exception. Since 2007, the Peekskill City School District has lost $80 million in foundation aid and is additionally owed $1 million in pandemic adjustment aid. In a district where 79% of the student body is considered economically disadvantaged, this is devastating. And again, that number is $80 million. I had to triple check it because it was so shocking to me to hear that. Compared to our surrounding suburban districts, our schools have consistently had to make do with much less. Our community and others like it should not need to lobby or rely on grassroots organizations to provide students with essential learning tools, but we do. Our district has been faced with cuts to extended day and summer programs, remediation and enrichment, and even supports for housing insecure students. Our wealthy neighbors have not been faced with such choices. Needless to say, the pandemic has profoundly worsened the impacts of this funding shortage, but there is a bright spot. People are now engaged like never before. There are other Peekskill residents on this call and so many more who actually tried to be here and couldn't. Our community groups are mighty and people are watching and listening. I urge you to support the Invest in Our New York Act. Now is the time to tax the rich, fund our schools, and support students, not billionaires. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you very much. Next is Ed Berry from the Sierra Club.
I think I unmuted myself.
Yes, you did, Ed.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon, or this evening, especially given all that is going on in our world. It is reassuring to see that the governor and the legislature are maintaining historic funding levels for key environmental programs. It shows an understanding that if we do not protect clean air and water, we are going to be exacerbating the public health and economic crisis that we are in now. Some key points on the budget, just very quickly. The DEC has increased responsibility with the staffing of the COVID response centers, the surge in park use, the administration of the CLCPA Act, as well as administrating the plastic bag ban, the glyphosate ban, the other toxic chemicals, and now the PFASs that is creeping into our water, not only in Rockland County, but we're hearing some talk about maybe Putnam also. They have not had any replacements for their retirees for several years. Clearly, the DEC needs some funding and new staff. The EPA, $300 million in the executive budget as now, please maintain, because for example, the primary funding source for drinking water and waste reduction infrastructure comes from the EPA. This is a proven economic generator and job creator, as well as a benefit for clean air and for clean water. Also, on a question of generating revenue through polluters penalty, there is the Climate and Community Investment Act that's been referenced by some other speakers that we fully support. Also, removing the fossil fuel industry subsidies, wetland protection, and then in closing, the energy and environmental safeguards to mitigate the negative effects of cannabis industry. We need enabling legislation that if you're going to legalize cannabis, we're not saying it, we're not taking a position, we're saying if you do, you have to have environmental energy standards, renewable energy procurement, limits to the carbon dioxide, and also use of pesticides, water conservation standards, and plans to reduce the use of public plastic, and then also a moratorium on new gas-funded power plants.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is Noel Beal, Catholic Schools from the Archdiocese of New York.
Unmute.
Yes, you're unmuted, Noel.
Hello, how are you tonight?
Good.
It's good to be with all of you. I'm sorry we're doing it virtually instead of in person. As you know, I've spoken before you in the past. I am the regional superintendent and represent the Catholic schools here in Westchester County. Let me begin by saying thank you for allowing this opportunity and for allowing me to be here this evening. First and foremost, I want to say how grateful we are to Governor Cuomo for ensuring that mandated services reimbursements will remain at the full extent for this year. However, for the 21-22 executive budget, it includes a decrease in funding for mandated services at a time not only when our schools can least afford it, but when our expenses have dramatically increased in fulfilling the state's COVID-related mandates. While we recognize that the state cannot afford to reimburse our schools for these additional COVID-related costs, it is critical that mandated services statute be amended to ensure that state-imposed costs not covered by emergency federal fundings are acknowledged and eligible for future reimbursement. We also strongly urge you to reject the executive budget proposal, which would limit the state's liability under the program to the amount appropriated. The very essence of mandated services enacted in 1974 centers on schools being reimbursed for their actual expenses in fulfillment of state mandates and participating in state assessment. Limiting the state's liability to an amount that lawmakers are able to or willing to reimburse our schools at any given year will give significant impact to our incredibly fragile school budgets. I want to thank you again for your commitment always to the STEM program, the AIS funds, and for health and safety equipment. And thank you for all that you do to always support our non-public schools.
Thank you, Noel. Thank you very much. Now I turn it over to Senator Reichlin-Melnick.
Thank you, Senator Mayer. Our next speaker is Ray Lipstein, who is a constituent.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Hi, Ray.
Okay.
How are you?
Can I hear you? Doesn't matter. No. Okay. Yes. Okay. My name is Ray. I work at the New Yorker magazine, but right now I'm here as a resident of Rockland County. I want to express my admiration, first of all, for what this delegation has achieved, specifically on cash bail reform, even before a crisis. I know that some of you fought off heat for that in re-election, in part because of what you have already delivered for our communities directly. I am a public school student. I went to Rockland County Schools, Mariposa Central School District, and I believe that the education that I got there, in addition to being fed, housed, taken to doctors for my mystery illnesses, all of those things led directly to my being able to congratulate you today on fighting for justice. It led directly to my being able to see what issues are important. And so I believe that fighting for the Invest in Our New York Act circles right back to your mandate, because having communities that are protected leads to people voting for you who protect our communities. I just want to emphasize how important this is and how popular it is. 90% of New Yorkers, I've been phone banking, 90% of New Yorkers, I didn't speak to 90% of New Yorkers or 100% of them, but some people crunch the numbers. They support taxing the wealthy to prevent social cuts to social services, like the kind that Cuomo has proposed, the kinds that he's either quietly or publicly enacted. I've heard, you've heard from some of the victims of those cuts today and on Thursday. I don't think that Governor Cuomo is going to be getting any applause at any press conferences for them, unless he's speaking to an audience of COVID billionaires or giant burlap sacks of capital gains, which is, I believe, how capital gains are distributed. What I do think will happen is that if you pass the Invest in Our New York package, no millionaires will leave, no billionaires will leave, Martha's staying put, no one who's making $500,000 a year is leaving commuting distance of East Hampton in order to have a society that works for everyone and to generate game-changing sums that can solve these problems. So I appreciate you all, and I support you in supporting it.
Thank you very much, Ray. Up next, we have Renee Toback, who is a constituent. Renee, are you there?
I don't seem to be able to start my video.
There you are.
Here I come.
Okay, welcome.
Okay, my name is Renee Toback. I'm an economist living in Yonkers, New York. Year after year, we confront a budget gap and act as if it's a unique situation rather than a chronic problem. I think we have to bring our revenue base up to meet our public investment and service goals rather than the other way around. The tax structure of New York State needs to be rejuvenated. We are entirely too dependent on regressive sales and property taxes. We need to replace them with a robust progressive income tax and shift the burden of taxation from those least able to those most able to bear it. The upper echelons of the income distribution need to pay their fair share in tax in various forms, including taxes on investment income, inheritance tax, and potentially a tax on extreme wealth. Research shows that increasing marginal tax rates of elite earners does not result in an appreciable exit of high earners. Extensive data analysis of 45 million tax returns over a 13-year period showed very small negative effects on high earner migration. The study suggested that the upper income marginal tax rate that would be revenue maximizing would be in excess of 50%, far greater than our top. Also, allowing one of our major industries, the financial sector, to escape any tax is another prime source for revenue enhancement. The myth of financial tax flight has been refuted by data analysis conducted for the New York Assembly in 2003. The University of Massachusetts indicated that after imposing this tax on the cost of trading, the total cost of trading would be less than it was in the 1990s. Normal trade would be very little impacted by this tiny tax, but rapid traders would feel the impact and perhaps be encouraged to cease from engaging in this speculative activity. Consideration of the tax proposals by the Invest in Our New York Coalition would certainly be a step towards realizing the public investment dreams of most New Yorkers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Up next, we have Sarah Armisto with the Alzheimer's Association.
There we go.
Hi,
everyone.
Sarah, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Great.
I see many familiar faces. As said, my name is Sarah Misto. I live in Port Chester, and I'm an advocate and volunteer for the Alzheimer's Association. In 2014, my father was suddenly diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and I voluntarily put my educational career on hold to be his primary caregiver. I turned to the Alzheimer's Association to receive more information about the free programs, services, and support groups for caregivers like myself. As we know, COVID-19 possesses unique challenges for people with dementia and their families. In the space of less than 72 hours, with no disruption in services, the entire staff was transitioned to work remotely without interrupting services and successfully converted support groups, educational programs, and care consultations to a virtual format. We are asking for your continued support in preserving and maintaining this evidence-based initiative at the robust funding level of $25 million, as well as the restoration of supplemental Alzheimer's public health fundraising in the budget totaling $1.37 million in order to maintain our state's existing public health infrastructure for fiscal year 21-22. So I want to thank you for your time and your continued support.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thanks for joining us. Next up, we have Eric Raketa, who's with the Peekskill City School District PTO.
Good evening, everybody. I think I have that right.
Okay, you're here. Welcome.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Great, thank you. Thank you to the Westchester State Senate Delegation for hosting this forum. As said, my name is Eric Raketa, and I'm a resident of Peekskill, New York. I'm speaking tonight to demand New York State fully fund public education in our city. I'm the parent of 2 young children in the district, and my wife teaches special education here as well. And I'm also a teacher in a similar public school district. Peekskill is an incredibly diverse city with public schools that support a wide array of learning needs. Yet, for far too long, our district has been forced to do more with less. We need fair, comprehensive funding to ensure our children receive an education commensurate with neighboring, more affluent districts. We are currently owed, as someone else said, $80 million in foundation aid, as well as another $1 million in additional funds this year due to the pandemic adjustment. Foundation aid is the only needs-based education funding formula in New York, and we should not have to plead each budget cycle for money that we are morally and legally entitled to. Our demand for fair funding is imperative in this time of COVID. And for this reason, I'm sure a lot of people have been speaking about education today. While Peekskill has made great progress in recent years, our district is still woefully underfunded, and the pandemic threatens to reverse the gains we have made. Now more than ever, we need funds to increase social and emotional wellness, remediation and programming interventions, funds to extend the school day and school year for our learners with additional needs, funds to reduce class sizes, and funds to hire and retain valuable staff, among other things. If New York State is to protect students, not billionaires, it must find new revenue sources for our public schools. I strongly support the Invest in Our New York Act, as collectively, these 6 bills represent the best way to protect our students and families from the effects of COVID-19 now and in the future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Eric. Up next, we have Francesca Hagedus, who's a parent, and I'm sorry if I got your name wrong there.
Unmute and start video. Here we go. Hello, everybody. It's nice to see some good friends here, as well as I'd like to thank you for hosting this. I'm speaking tonight, although this is a personal story, I'm representing many, many parents that I've discussed this with. I have a son who has been mentally ill since birth. And he, as you know, in New York State, special needs children are to be educated until they're 21 years old. However, he turned 21 years old on February 18th, 2020, went back to school after winter recess, and his school shut down a few days later. He received no transition services, even though they tried through Zoom meetings and Google, and his therapist stood in our driveway. And I'm speaking, as I said, for every parent from that graduating class. There were 9 of them. There are kids from Andrus that went through the same thing. They were just, I mean, not dumped, because that's a very aggressive way of saying it, but they were just left to their own devices. I had to cobble together whatever I could, which resulted into emergency room visits, police being called. It was a nightmare. We have not had 5 stable days since the lockdown. Okay, we have been in crisis. I've had crisis counselors coming to the house. I've been with OPWDD, the OMH, but they take very long to get their services in place. I understand they're understaffed. Our children deserve compensatory transitional therapeutic programs. He'd finish his academics, but therapeutic programs. He cannot cope without being in a therapeutic environment. He needs more support. And so do the other graduates, as I said, from the Clearview School, from Andrea School. And I have tried to talk to the director. I said, why not get their health insurance to pay for this? We all have private health insurance. Many of these kids are on Medicaid, as is my son. Why not? And he said he would look into it. Well, I'd appreciate if you would look into it.
Thank you very much. Up next, we have John Mermelstein with the UFT.
Hey, good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
So I'm speaking as a product of Scarsdale Public Schools, as well as a public school teacher currently teaching in District 5 in New York City in West Harlem. So first of all, I want to thank you, Andrea Stewart-Cousins. Your 2006 rally with Bill Clinton was my first time ever seeing a politician speak, and I've followed your career since. And I want to thank you, Senator Meyer, for your bill in last legislative session to raise taxes on the wealthy in order to fully fund schools. The reason why my education was so amazing in Scarsdale wasn't just because of the classroom, wasn't just because we had great teachers while we did, but it was because of the holistic education we had, because of a wide variety of enrichment programs, ranging from the garden program, debate program, computers, and many things that require investment. I want to echo what Giovanni said earlier about the role that after school and extracurricular programs play in a child's life, as well as a strong, healthy community. At the school that I teach, PS 161, we have a robust debate program where our students have competed on the state level. We have one of the top dance and art programs in the city, as well as an after-school library program where students both come before school and after school to read with the librarian and to practice English. Every single one of these programs is subject to being cut next year. And so what I want to ask is this: is it crazy to think that every student in New York State deserves the same education that I had as a Scarsdale resident? If not, if it's not crazy, then we will support the Invest in Our New York Act, because it's not just school funding that's at play here. And schools are facing increased costs, both because of COVID, as well as the $7.8 billion bailout to Exelon. Caitlin spoke brilliantly about the intersection between environmental justice and public services. Costs are going up as ratepayers have to pay more on electricity. It's not just school funding that affects our students, it's also the MTA, it's also NYCHA, it's also our public hospitals. Every single one of these services can be saved if we just invest the necessary revenue. I urge you to stand up to Governor Cuomo and stand up on behalf of your communities and fight for the Invest in Our New York Act. Thank you very much for listening. Have a great night.
Thank you so much, John. Appreciate you being here. Next up, we have Luisa Fernanda Villa, who is a constituent. Luisa, are you there?
Hi, yes, I'm here. Hi.
Okay, welcome.
Welcome, thank you. Thank you, senators and staff, for facilitating this budget forum. My name is Luisa Fernanda Villa, a longtime resident of West Harrison, most recent a constituent of New York State Senate District 35, represented by Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins. As currently indicated, the governor proposes plans contingent on federal aid with reductions to state school funding by over $1.5 billion in his executive budget proposal. Rather, I speak in support of the Invest in Our New York Act in coalition with the New York Working Families Party, Lower Hudson Valley and New York City DSA, Westpeck Foundation, Make the Road, New York Youth Climate Leaders, and hundreds of other organizations. The Invest in Our New York Act would raise state revenue and allow for an increase in funds to aid vital public services like education and educational support services. Even before COVID-19, there long existed disparities in education, with New York State ranking 49th in the nation on equity in education spending. The conditions have only worsened during this pandemic, with the new challenges that have come with remote hybrid learning for school districts, teachers, parents, and most importantly, students. More than before, there's a need to increase funds in education to aid in additional resources for this transition and to invest in our future. Students, especially those in elementary school, have a growing need for more guided help to engage and understand topics, which requires more focused attention and care. Working families already stretched thin are entitled to free in-school and after-school childcare. Teachers overworked are entitled to fair and equal compensation. School districts require more teachers for the additional need of smaller classrooms to aid in learning and safety measures. There's fiscal capacity in the state budget to invest and fund a sustainable and free education and educational support services for all through proper revenue management and legislator co-sponsorship of the Invest in Our New York Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Louisa. Have a good evening. And next up, we have Elaine Katz with Irvington Activists and a Personal Issue. Elaine, are you there?
There. Hi, sorry about that.
No, do you have, is your video on?
I'm trying.
Okay, there we go. Okay, welcome.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. I am a lifelong New Yorker and a 25+ year Westchester County resident. Distinguished senators, I don't envy you. Listening to passionate advocates for worthwhile programs, knowing that we are all competing for minimal discretionary funds. It's a Hobbesian choice. And this year, the choice got harder, with the pandemic both increasing the need for municipal services and decreasing tax revenues. There's an answer to this dilemma, 6 pending pieces of legislation called, and you've heard it before tonight, the Investment in Our New York Act. To deal with taxing higher incomes, a progressive income tax so that people earning $22,000 and those earning $1 million do not pay the same rate. Modifying the capital gains tax so that income from investments, the way a lot of rich people earn much of their money, is taxed like wages, the way the rest of us earn our money. 2, dealing with wealth, a progressive tax on large sums of inherited wealth, and the billionaire's tax, which would tax the value of investment assets owned by billionaires. Homeowners pay a property tax every year. Why should massive investment taxes go untaxed? 2, dealing with taxing corporate and financial sectors. The Wall Street tax would place a small tax on financial transactions. We pay sales tax when we buy clothes. Why not when we buy a share of stock? The corporate tax bill would repeal the Trump tax reductions on the maximum corporate and real estate business tax rates. These 6 acts increase revenues by $50 billion to $70 billion per year, plus a first-year bonus of $31 billion. Please stop making us passionate activists for worthy programs, public servants, and the public compete for an ever-dwindling pie. We, the people, deserve better. And I thought that this would take me a full 2 minutes, so I just want to say hi to Pete, Andrea, and Shelley. Sorry, I don't know you, Elijah. I want to add a little bit about my credentials. I was a village judge. I am. Time is up. There you go.
Okay. Elaine, thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening. And our next speaker is Eric Leibowitz, who is a constituent. Good evening, Eric.
Good evening. Thank you, senators, for all you do. Thank you, staff, for facilitating. And thank you to all those who have testified. I'm so grateful to be able to take part in this budget forum so that I can echo my fellow constituents and advocate for the Invest in Our New York campaign. My name is Eric Leibowitz. I'm a resident of White Plains and a constituent of New York State Senate District 35, represented by Madam Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins. I run my own business as a music therapist in private practice. I serve as seniors in assisted living homes and rehabilitation centers, adults in special needs homes, children in preschools, and the typically functioning adult, of which even the strongest of individuals are experiencing stress and hardship, in part due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but more so to the ever-present social inequality that is a barrier to their successes, health, and well-being. I have seen the negative impact faced by underpaid healthcare workers and educators in underfunded public programs. The governor's plan to cut $1.8 billion in Medicaid spending will only further exacerbate the conditions for the loving and caring people who work as essential workers in these much needed programs. The Invest in Our New York campaign would raise revenue to bring in more funds to these programs like healthcare, education, environmental protection, and infrastructure. As a small business owner, healthcare provider, and educator, this campaign would support me and the rest of New Yorkers. I implore you to co-sponsor the Invest in Our New York campaign. To feel supported by our representatives, to feel heard, to feel safe, plays a part in our recovery in terms of our mental health, well-being, and financial security. Thank you so much for your time, for your work, for your support, and thank you for investing in your New York, in my New York, and in our New York. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Eric. Next up is James Carmody with the Lower Hudson River Valley Democratic Socialists of America.
Hello, thank you for having me, and hello to all my neighbors as well. My name is James Carmody, and I've lived in the Lower Hudson Valley for almost my entire life. And in these 20 years, not once has my family ever found good mental health care or social services. My mother, God rest her soul, labored endlessly on a Carmel PTA to get basic special education for me. The school district was routinely unreliable, and every year meant more fights and more stress for her. Eventually, in 2010, the stress was overwhelming and malignancy grew. There was a stress of no mental health services for a child, of a failing social safety net, of unhelpful care, and of it all. The only way she could have survived it all is if our society had helped rather than hurdled her. So what's keeping Carmel, Putnam County, and New York from helping families like mine? One word: money. All our communities need is more money to spend on our people, and our lives will be good. We'd have mental health carers, social workers, and services for our needs if we only invested in them. That's why I urge every legislator here to pass the Invest in Our New York Act, as many others have echoed before. Your duty to us is to get this budget reconciled without cuts to our already dire services. This leaves you with one option: tax the rich. And the 6 IONY bills will let you do just that. They're the only way we'll raise the money mothers like mine need to survive. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, James. Have a great evening. And I'm going to turn it back over to our Majority Leader.
Thank you so much, Senator Melnick. Our next person is Jeremy Vargas.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you very much. My name is Jeremy Vargas. I live in Yonkers, and I'm a constituent of Senator Andrea Stewart-Cousins.
You're doing.
Even before COVID-19, New York State was facing a budget deficit of billions. As a Yonkers resident who's lived in both the North and South ends, I've personally seen that reflected in the extreme income inequality in our region. Now in this pandemic, many are at risk due to the threat of unemployment and budget cuts, all while the net worth of billionaires in the top 5% minority in the state has risen. For some quick personal context, my household includes my mother, who's a frontline healthcare worker at a public hospital, my father, whose employer closed down suddenly due to the pandemic, and multiple siblings all in college and high school. Our family has recovered from the terror of catching COVID-19, and we were very fortunate that my employer didn't conduct any layoffs this time, so we've been able to survive. However, the looming threat of budget cuts has me worried that our jobs are still at risk, along with the lack of necessary public safety nets to get us through in this worst case scenario. Many of my friends and family are in similar situations. We need to actually support the working class via public safety net, public transit, quality public housing, healthcare justice, well-resourced public schools, environmental justice, and public jobs programs. The governor's usual approach to budget season has been cutting taxes for the wealthy while slashing public programs that benefit the working class. While true that the federal government has largely failed us throughout the pandemic, the state must do its part too. Instead of austerity, we need to raise the necessary revenue by taxing the wealthy. I'm aware that there's been discussion at the state level finally acknowledging the need for marijuana legalization and some tax increases. However, we need to go further to actually meet the scale of the crisis. The Invest in Our New York Act, a package of 6 bills, would raise revenue while addressing the long existing wealth disparities that have only worsened due to COVID-19. New York State has a GDP comparable to the entirety of Canada, so the money is very much here. We must look towards legislation that helps the majority of residents in New York State. I stand in solidarity with the Lower Hudson Valley DSA and the numerous other sponsoring orgs and call on you to support the Invest in Our New York Act. Let's tax the rich and create a stronger New York. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. Okay, I understand that Gabby Resnick is not here. So we'll go to Raghav Joshi, Students Against Nicotine.
Hi.
Hi, Raghav.
Just 1 second. Thank you, Senators. My name is Raghav Joshi. I'm a junior at Glenbrook High School, and I'm the Director of Outreach at Students Against Nicotine. At last year's forum, you heard from our Executive Director, A. Baker Butler, about the importance of banning flavored e-cigarettes, and we applaud you for doing so by including the ban in the previous budget. Despite the flavor ban, non-flavored e-cigarettes are still easily accessible to minors. The pandemic has worsened the epidemic because 1 in 5 teens now are using e-cigarettes, and the lack of in-person school and associated adult supervision has deepened addiction and diminished quitting opportunities for e-cigarette users. Simultaneously, the costs of vaping have never been higher, with teen e-cigarette users 5 times more likely to experience COVID-19 symptoms than their non-vaping peers. Moreover, vaping involves hand-to-mouth contact and clouds of vapor, which are both spreaders of COVID-19. The State Senate has an effective revenue-positive solution to address the vaping and COVID crises by raising the excise taxes on all tobacco products, including e-cigarettes. In this year's budget, I urge you to raise the cigarette and e-cigarette taxes by $1. New York has not raised a tax on tobacco products in over a decade, and as a result, a simple tax increase would yield significant benefits. According to a recent New York study, such a tax on tobacco products would yield over $35 million in annual revenue, save $1.5 billion in long-term tobacco-related healthcare costs, and provide a powerful disincentive to new users, especially teenagers. As a teenager myself, I can confidently say that an increased parallel tax on cigarette and e-cigarette products will profoundly disincentivize my peers from purchasing another pack or a pod. This will be a win-win-win situation, an extremely effective way to boost funding while saving money in the process and protecting the lungs, lives, and public health of my generation. I urge you to act. Thank you for hearing my testimony.
Thank you so much, Raghav.
Thank you.
It seems that Tom Corbia is not with us. Is Ann Muller here? Ann with the League of Humane Voters. There she is.
Can you see me?
No, we can hear you though.
Okay.
Okay, I see the beach. This is good.
Oh, yes, sorry.
There you go. Came out of the water into the, okay.
Thank you to the Westchester delegation for giving Love New York, the League of Humane Voters of New York, the opportunity to make our budget request today. We've been particularly struck by the many legitimate needs for funding that have been presented during this forum. And we believe there is a way to provide millions more to the businesses and charities that have appealed for financial help in these desperate times. According to the New York State Comptroller's Office, the last audit of the Conservation Fund was done in 2012, and it showed millions of general fund dollars going to their goal of promoting hunting, trapping, and fishing. In addition to the general fund's contribution to wildlife management, the Bureau of Wildlife also receives a portion of the federal excise tax on firearms and ammunition, which is based in part on the number of hunting permits the Bureau sells. Unlike excise taxes on alcohol and tobacco, which go to the general fund, The firearms excise tax goes only to the Wildlife Management Bureau of States, including New York. Thus, the general fund is contributing millions to a small bureau within the DEC that is intertwined with the profits of the firearms industry and now the NRA. To have such a government entity makes it virtually impossible to get humane wildlife laws passed or even common sense gun laws. But especially at this time of extreme need for healthcare, housing, food, and education, and the many other needs expressed by businesses and charitable groups appealing for funds in this forum, we strongly believe that the New York State budget should not be used for a lethal hobby, namely hunting, that is engaged in by less than 3% of New York's population, and by so doing would free up millions of dollars. We'll be sending additional comment this week with supporting documentation. And thank you very much for the opportunity to present today.
Thank you so much, Ms. Muller. Okay. Next, we'll be hearing from Tom Thacker.
Let's see. Is that me? Yes.
That's you.
That's me. I'm trying to get it together here. Here we go. Am I on?
We see you. We hear you.
Okay, good. So thank you so much. Thanks to all of you for your time and your dedication, your public service. And I know that this must be trying listening to all of us, so I will try to keep it short. In response to the revenue shortfalls, I know that Governor Cuomo has suggested cuts to programs and services, and I oppose all of those cuts. He's also suggested an increase in revenue streams through higher rates of taxation on the wealthiest of our citizens, which I support. But unfortunately, these contemplated tax increases would be short-term and expire as New York's budget comes back into balance. In my mind, this kind of short-term thinking about taxation policy does not represent an adequate vision of what New York should look like now or what it should look like in the future. There's simply not enough to use taxation policy to get back to a balanced budget that has left so many needs unmet in the past. So instead, I believe that the legislators should pass the Invest in Our New York Act. As all of you know, this act would promise to generate tens of billions of dollars of revenue every year. And as a result, would not just address our short-term problems, but would lead to the expansion of needed programs and services. It would adequately fund climate change initiatives, infrastructure, public transportation, and schools. So I believe really, really strongly in the power of social investment, and I don't believe very strongly in the power of private gain. And we've seen a lot of private gain during this pandemic and even prior to this pandemic. So I would like to shift the balance here. And I would just really, really strongly urge all of you to pass the Invest in Our New York Act, because I know that many of you believe very strongly in social investment as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Thacker. The last speaker, Elena Sassower, Center for Judicial Accountability, Inc.
Hello.
Hi there.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Elena Sassower, and I am director and co-founder of the nonpartisan nonprofit citizens organization, Center for Judicial Accountability. Our website is www.judgewatch.org, and from its prominent center panel entitled Comparing New York's Legislature Before and After Its Fraudulent Pay Raise, you can find the evidentiary substantiation of this testimony. Last year, I testified before you, repeating what I have stated and proven to you previously, that the New York State budget is off the constitutional rails, stealing taxpayer money by a mountain of constitutional, statutory, and legislative rule violations. This specifically includes the legislative budget, which temporary Senate President Stewart-Cousins is constitutionally required to certify, but instead simply signs, and whose larcenies last year included pay raises for legislators that are the product of a force of law committee report that is a false instrument. Simultaneously, it included legislative stipends the report eliminated. My final words were, these are penal law violations, and those final words and an itemization of the substantiating evidence I handed up at last year's local budget forum are featured in 62 fully documented public corruption grand jury complaints I filed with New York's 62 district attorneys pertaining to the fiscal year 2021 budget. The complaint I filed with then Westchester DA Scarpino was against Westchester's 14 state legislators. Last month, I refiled it with newly elected Westchester DA Roca, and last week reinforced its urgency by notifying her that this year's fiscal year 2022 budget repeats virtually all the violations that complaint had identified pertaining to the current budget. I am available to meet with you to discuss the foregoing, including as to the specifics relating to the fiscal year 2022.
Thank you, Ms. Sauer. Oh, dear. Okay. So I'm so sorry, but I really do appreciate the fact that everyone has been able to, articulate their concerns, stay within our confines, and really make sure that we understand the impact that this budget has on our residents and the people you represent, yourselves and your organizations and businesses. We take this extremely seriously, and we know that you are looking to us for answers to what New York's future will be. And we continue to want to invest in you, our community, to make sure that our future is good, smart, progressive, and really an example for the nation to follow. So again, I want to thank my colleagues, Senator Mayer and Senator Harckham, Senator Reichlin-Melnick, Senator Biaggi, and Senator Bailey, the Westchester delegation, I'll say Westchester, Rockland, and Putnam delegation, and assure you that we will be working. And again, if you didn't get a chance to say all that you needed to say, and should we need to follow up, we certainly will. Our staff has your contact information and your testimony, so we will be working with what you've given us. And again, thank you. Have an extremely good night. Stay safe, stay well, and until we meet again, hopefully in person. Thank you so much. Good night, everyone.